Imagine being about to be thrown into a cauldron of boiling oil, knowing for certain that there's no escape from death. Now, imagine walking out unharmed, without even a scratch, while everyone around is left in shock. It sounds like fiction, but that's exactly what happened to the Apostle John. How did he survive such a terrible fate? And more importantly, why? This extraordinary event goes far beyond a simple miracle. It makes us question the very nature of faith, divine protection, and even destiny. John was not just any disciple. He was chosen to witness and survive the impossible, and that changed the history of Christianity forever. Curious to know how and why this miracle happened? Stay with me, and together, we'll uncover the secrets behind this remarkable story. When we think of a miracle, we immediately imagine something impossible, defying logic and science. That was the experience John had when he was thrown into a cauldron of boiling oil and, against all odds, came out unscathed. This scene transcends the physical, highlighting an unshakable faith and a unique divine intervention. Picture someone in a seemingly hopeless situation, surrounded by the suffocating heat of a death sentence, yet still being spared from any harm. It's something that boggles the mind and opens the door to understanding the power of true faith. Of course, for many, this type of story seems far removed from everyday reality. But think about the fires we face every day. They aren't always literal, but can be moments of difficulty, personal trials, or even that feeling of being drowned under life's pressures. Just like John, who stood firm in his faith even when facing imminent death, we too can find strength in our beliefs, whether in God, destiny, or our own ability to overcome. That's where John's miracle resonates in our modern lives. A reminder that no matter how hot the situation may seem, there's always a chance to emerge unharmed. John's survival in that cauldron is a living reminder that sometimes what we think is the end is actually the beginning of a new journey. And, you see, this isn't something limited to biblical figures. Any one of us can experience small miracles when we remain true to our convictions. In this sense, John's story opens up to something bigger, something that invites us to reflect on divine interventions in moments of pure adversity. Divine protection frequently appears in biblical stories, but John's case really makes us reflect. He survived a deadly situation, something that to human eyes seemed impossible. It's as if God was right there beside him when the oil boiled, creating an invisible barrier between John and the heat. This protection not only spared him physically, but also served as a powerful symbol that true faith can overcome any barrier. Think about how many times we feel vulnerable, as if we're about to be consumed by problems, but something unexpected protects us. This idea of divine protection reminds us of another famous story, that of the 3 Hebrews thrown into the fiery furnace, who emerged unscathed through the same divine intervention. John experienced something similar, reinforcing a powerful principle. No matter how terrible the trial, there is a greater force that can intervene on our behalf. Of course, many of us won't face something as dramatic as a furnace or a cauldron of oil, but think about the moments when we escape difficult situations seemingly by miracle. It's in those moments that we realize how protected we may be by something beyond what we can see. The most interesting thing is that this protection doesn't come out of nowhere. It's often directly connected to our faith and our stance in the face of adversity. Just like John, who never wavered in his belief even when facing certain death, we too can strengthen ourselves through this faith. And here's a fascinating question. How far can our faith take us, and what else might happen when we keep hope alive, despite everything? In the time of the Apostle John, the Roman Empire wasn't just a military power, but also an environment of intense persecution. Under the reign of Emperor Domitian, Christians faced unimaginable challenges, and many had their faith tested. Domitian demanded to be worshipped as a god, a requirement that put Christ's followers in an extremely difficult position. John, refusing to worship the emperor, was condemned to a terrible execution, something common at the time for those who defied the power of Rome. Imagine the tension in that scenario, where your very life depended on your devotion and conviction. Understanding the historical context of that time makes us reflect on how much early Christians were willing to sacrifice for their faith. It wasn't a matter of convenience or practicality, but one of absolute loyalty. In this sense, John emerges as one of the strongest figures. When condemned by the emperor, he knew there wouldn't be a fair trial, let alone mercy. To Domitian, John represented a threat, a leader inspiring thousands to follow a path that went against imperial worship. It's fascinating to observe how, even in the face of such severe threats, John remained steadfast, never denying his faith. Roman persecutions intensified as Christianity expanded, and figures like John became increasingly influential. What the emperor didn't expect, however, was that the attempt to silence John would end up amplifying his message. Instead of being destroyed, he became living proof that even in the worst circumstances, faith could prevail. And that was just the beginning of an even greater story that would unfold after his sentencing. John is remembered as the beloved disciple, a central figure in the development of early Christianity. Among all the apostles, John held a special place, being entrusted by Jesus with responsibilities few others had. Not only was he present at crucial moments in Christ's life, but he also wrote essential parts of the New Testament, including the Gospel of John and Revelation. These writings shaped much of Christian thought, bringing profound teachings about Jesus' life and revelations about the future of the Christian faith. John's role as a writer cannot be overstated. His texts go beyond simple historical accounts. They offer theological reflections that continue to inspire millions today. In the Gospel of John, for example, we see a special focus on love and closeness to Christ, something not as emphasized in the other Gospels. This detail highlights the importance of his relationship with Jesus, which translated not just into words but into actions. Additionally, writing Revelation during his exile on Patmos, John was able to share visions that still provoke interpretations and debates among scholars and believers today. Interestingly, John's mission didn't end with his writing. He mentored early Christian communities, helping to lay the foundation for a religion that would grow exponentially in the following centuries. His commitment to faith and his ability to translate his experiences into words made John one of the most influential figures in spreading Christianity. Looking at his journey, we can see that his influence goes far beyond what the sacred texts record. After surviving the execution attempt in boiling oil, John was exiled to the island of Patmos, a desolate and lonely place. The intent was to silence him, to remove him from his influences and let him fade away in isolation. However, what seemed like a sentence of oblivion became a divine opportunity. It was on Patmos that John received the revelations that would become the Book of Revelation, one of the most enigmatic and powerful books of the Bible. It's curious how, many times, what seems like punishment can turn into a moment of profound reflection and discovery. Patmos wasn't just a place of exile, but also an environment where John could reconnect with the divine in an even more intense way. Away from the crowds and the pressures of the outside world, he was able to hear and record the messages that would forever change how Christianity understands the future and God's plan. Imagine being alone on an island, without comfort, without company, and still being graced with such grand visions. This leads us to reflect on how moments of loneliness and difficulty can sometimes bring out the deepest parts of ourselves. It's important to highlight that John's exile wasn't the end of his journey, but a new chapter. His visions on Patmos, which led to the Book of Revelation, continue to influence the faith and understanding of Christians worldwide. What seemed like an attempt to silence his voice only amplified it further. Just like John, we can often find purpose in the most challenging moments, as long as we are open to listening to what those times have to teach us. The story of the Apostle John is, above all, a testimony of unshakable faith and perseverance. Facing numerous adversities, from Roman persecution to the execution attempt, John never let himself be overcome. His trust in God was his strength, and even in the darkest circumstances, he stood firm. This is a lesson we can bring into our own lives. How often do we find ourselves facing challenges that seem insurmountable? John's story reminds us that, with faith, we can overcome any obstacle. However, perseverance isn't just about resisting difficulties. It's also about finding purpose in them. John transformed his exile and trials into opportunities to strengthen his faith and transmit messages that continue to inspire today. Think of it as a marathon. The goal isn't just to cross the finish line, but to learn from every stage of the race. Instead of despairing in the face of challenges, John embraced his mission with even more determination, showing that true faith doesn't depend on circumstances, but on the connection we maintain with the divine. This example of perseverance offers us a path to follow. When everything seems to be against us, it's precisely in that moment that our faith can shine brightest. And that is the real message of John's story. To believe, even when the evidence seems contrary, and to trust that something greater is guiding our steps. It's a message that transcends time and still speaks to us today, offering hope and inspiration for each of us in our own journeys. Now that you know John's incredible story, it's hard to stay still, ISN. Tiet? Think for a moment. If one man's faith could lead him to survive a cauldron of boiling oil, what can your faith do for you? Is it time to rethink the barriers you put in your own way? If John hadn't believed, maybe the story would be different. And in your life, are you ready to trust the process, even when everything seems to be against you? Take this opportunity to strengthen your faith, act with courage, and seek transformation. Has it clicked yet? Then don't waste any time. Subscribe to the channel, activate notifications, and keep learning. Stories like this are filled with powerful lessons that can change your life. Are you ready for what's next?